call this meeting to order. All those capable, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk please call roll?
Commissioner Neil Younger,
Present.
Chair Nathan Liker,
Here.
Commissioner Michael Burgess.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Are there any changes to the order of business? We are going to add one item before the jail assessment. That'll involve the county appraiser discussing the R&R rate. So, okay. Moving on, prior minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look through those?
Everything looks good.
Looks fine.
Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda. Any comments or discussion?
Yep, just a lot of stuff going on. A lot of funding.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, items A through G.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, the agenda's approved. Next, we have issues from people not on the order of business. People from the public that wish to speak. Okay, come on up.
Hello, my name's Justin Ziegler. I'm the owner of Trash Be Gone here in Hayes, for those of you that don't know. We are one of the two trash companies, and I guess my reason I was here is with the letter we got the other day about the prices of the landfill going up. It's getting it very tough for us to be competitive with the other competitor in town. And I guess before we did something different or looked into other avenues, I was going to see if we couldn't figure out a way to work together. And I realized, well, they said we could, pass the costs on. But one example I want to bring up of passing costs on is earlier this year, the competitor that came in raised the price of the rates for the county. And I got a phone call from a couple county members asking to bid some of the locations. We put a bid in, and at the time they told us that the bid was okay. And then when they called to cancel, the other competitor was a little upset about that and asked if they could put a bid in. They put a bid in, dropped the price, and of course we didn't get the bid. And I understand that you guys got to look out for what's best interest in the county. But like I said, I just can't compete with the price that you guys are charging, $90 a ton, when I know what it costs to actually haul it down there. I've talked with Clayton Bedford, I've talked with Garden City, and I don't know. I guess rather than try and sit here and compete with you guys, if we do something different, if we give in to the other company that has called us multiple times trying to buy us out, or what to do, I don't know. So, and if you guys want more detail, I could visit with you in detail, fill you in on more information, but I didn't want to take up a whole lot of your time.
Okay. Comments? Gentlemen? Questions?
I don't have any comments at this time. I'll try to reach out to you and get more details and talk to you a little bit more one-on-one.
Nope, I'd appreciate it.
And just for the, so what, we're raising our rates, and I'll put Justin from environmental on the spot, is we're raising our rates to
90.
$2.90. Okay, and that's for municipal waste? Go ahead, come on up, Justin.
Hi, Justin Craig, Environmental Services Director. Yes, regular municipal rates will go up to 90. When we did our price increase last year, we instituted a 3-tier program so that if you bring more trash, if you bring up 75 tons or 300 tons average a month over a year, you get a discounted rate. So for 2023, actually, Trash Be Gone didn't quite make that total, but for 2024, they are trending to make that. So we included that in our letter so that In 2025, when the rates go up, he should be at $87 per ton.
Okay. Okay. And we charge, the way we manage our landfill is the taxpayers do not subsidize our landfill, more or less. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. All the fees we collect used to pay for everything, salaries, maintenance, fuel, hauling it off, everything, so.
And other than C and D, all the municipal waste is transferred out of Ellis County?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
And right now, it's costing us about $55 a ton to take it down there with the hauling and the disposal down there.
Okay. And so then the rest is just the maintenance on equipment and
Yeah,
buildings and,
And it just kind of happens to work out that what we charge for municipal waste, the minus the hauling fees to get it down there, that remaining $28 approximately actually ends up being about what it costs for our salaries, benefits to man the landfill, and then C&D kind of covers
okay.
maintenance and whatnot, so.
Okay. With that being said, forget the question I'm sorry, I forget the question I was going to ask. It was, we're going to transfer it out. It goes down. We're keeping the little bit extra to maintain. How were we last year on budget?
Last year, we did not hit our revenue goals, so we were basically in the red.
We were in the red. So then that's when the taxpayers more or less subsidized the landfill.
I believe it was funds that we'd had left over in the past.
Okay.
Yeah. So we kind of,
Darren, maybe speak
Yes.
to that.
Darren Myers, County Administrator. So the landfill or the solid waste budget is an enterprise fund. So they are solely based on, 100% of their expenses and revenues are based on the amount of trash collected and the fees collected at the scale or at the landfill. They were in the red last year because their revenues did not meet their expectations. Their expenses were higher than that. So when that happens and essentially you're over budget, each year there's an unencumbered cash rollover. And so that basically, for some of those bad years, if the landfill were to continue to operate in the red, those reserve funds would essentially decrease until there are no funds left, or if something major were to happen, no budget adjustment could be made or amended to buy a $100,000 loader or a couple $100,000 dozer and et cetera.
Okay. And we, Justin from Environmental, do we go out and competitively bid places where the trash, or where our municipal waste goes?
yeah, we will do that next year. They've had a contract since 2016 with
Okay.
Inner Circle to haul it and with Waste Connections to
Okay.
dispose of the waste. So those will come due in April 1st of 2026. So we'll go out next year to bid those, and hopefully they come in lower, and that would allow us to lower our prices down, which I would have no issues coming in and asking you guys for that. So.
Okay.
And the thing that's
Thank you,
happening
Justin.
With us too.
Go ahead.
Is our business is probably doubled or tripled this year. We've added more trucks with what's happened. And now we've kind of hit a little flat spot here because the competitor locked everybody in for several months. And so we've got more people waiting to join on here once their little time frame runs out.
Okay.
So is that an option for you to haul your own? I guess if you're going to stay in business, is that something that you've looked at?
Oh, yeah, I've got the numbers figured. I mean, we got trucks, or I've talked to Clayton already. I've talked to the landfill down at Garden City. I know what it takes. The only thing I've missed is the location.
Okay.
And then there's several others that says, well, if you do this, they would help us get a little more volume, because once you get everything going, you're going to have volume with it. And that's where I says we'd be competing and possibly taking revenue from the county. And I guess that's where I'm saying I'd rather try and work with the county than compete against the county. If there's anything we could figure out or come up with.
Okay. Well, I think Michael said he'd reach out to you, and I'll try and do the same and reach out to you and maybe get some more information.
And I can fill you in on some more details or stuff that's going on rather than on a private deal, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I know I had visited with you and asked you to come, and I appreciate that. That way everybody's in the loop in our community, what's going on.
Okay,
Okay.
will do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Appreciate
you. See you guys.
Yep. Okay, at this time, before we get into the jail assessment, the county appraiser, if he'd come up, we have some discussion over R&R, I believe.
Good morning, Eugene
Morning.
Rupp, County Appraiser.
Good morning.
So the county clerk's office did send out the revenue neutral notice. This is last week. There was consolidation in 2024 of several taxing units, and the result of the consolidation is that on some, if your property is located in one of these areas where the taxing units were consolidated, your prior year information is not showing up on these revenue neutral notices. So basically, anything that would indicate what your prior year value or taxes were for 2023 is showing a 0. I've visited with Bobby about this. I believe our office is best suited to answer questions the public might have about this. So if anybody out there does have one of these revenue neutral rate notices that does show 0 for prior year information, they can contact our office and we will assist them in getting those numbers and answering any other questions they may have about that revenue neutral notice. So is there anything additional you guys would like me to answer in regards to that?
You did mine fine yesterday, so that explained it, and that's why I asked if you would come and
Yes.
speak. And
So, again, our office does not send them out, but I do believe our office is better suited to help assist the public with any questions they may have in regards to them, so.
Very good. Thank you, Eugene. I appreciate the information.
thank you.
Okay. Next, we have the jail assessment. Right? No, I'm sorry. National Emergency Management Basics.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and Mr. Myers. I am Mark Willis. I'm the Training Program Manager and State Training Officer for the Kansas Division of Emergency Management. And I'm here before you to recognize what we consider a significant accomplishment in that Chief Lyle Pantel recently completed the FEMA National Emergency Management Basic Academy. Again, it's a very significant accomplishment. It consists of 3 weeks of training, 120 clock hours, covering 5 core courses, including Foundations of Emergency Management, the Science of Disasters, Planning and Emergency Operations, Public Information, and the Homeland Security Exercise and Evaluation Program. We are very grateful for the positive working relationship that we have with Chief Pantel, and I just wanted to personally be present to present the certificate to Lyle. You know, within our organization, there's a saying that, you know, all disasters start locally and end locally, and we very much respect and appreciate that, and are more than willing to provide support where we can, but we feel like Chief Pantel is much better positioned to assist your community in times of need. And so with that, congratulations, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now we will have our jail assessment. Gentlemen?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Alan Richardson with Justice Planners. We were contracted back at the first of the year in January to do a needs assessment for the detention center here in Ellis County. Been experiencing high numbers of inmate daily populations for some time. Very crowded, running out of space, and so we did a statistical analysis as well as an operational assessment of the facility now, and we just want to take a little bit of time this morning and just to to run through the findings. Just the outline of our presentation, we're going to talk about the county population as a whole, what it looks like, the growth rates that you're experiencing, your county jail population, who's in your facility, why are they in there, how long are they staying, which is impacted by court processing, case processing times. We'll take a look at that, show their impact on the population to be able to come up with some population forecasts is with a status quo if nothing changes tomorrow and the way business is done compared to how it's done today, as well as a couple of different alternative projections. What if this changes? How will it impact the population? How will that change it on this? We know that you've got the presentation in your materials, and we apologize for not being here last month. We were scheduled, and at the last minute, we had a hurricane come ashore in Texas and cancel our flights to get here. So I know there was a brief presentation made by the sheriff and the county administrator there on the materials. So we can take as much time as you would like this morning. We've got a pretty healthy slide deck, but our plan is to address these pretty much at a high level since you've got the materials and that you've seen them. I will say at any time, if you have questions, please interrupt us, stop. We'll be more than happy to address anything that's in here, answer any questions that you may have as we go along. Really, the goals of the forecast is to do a deep dive into the data, into arrests, into bookings, into case filings and processing, to use that information to construct, first of all, an analysis of who it is that you have in your detention facility now. Use that again to come up with some forecast scenarios as to what we think it's going to look like in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And not just the number of bodies that you're going to have, but the number of beds that would be required to be able to safely and securely manage and house those individuals. So with that, I'm going to let Patrick Jablonski come up, introduce himself, and he's going to get into the meat and potatoes of the data.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Patrick Jablonski. For lack of a better term, I'm a data nerd with Justice Planners. Essentially what that means is I grab a whole bunch of raw data in whatever jurisdiction with whom we're working, and I build a lot of mathematical models, and then we select out what the best predictive, most reliable, and valid mathematical models are. And so we've done that with Ellis County, and so we're happily will step through a lot of the analysis. And to echo what Alan said, at any time, you can stop me. I will tend to talk fast. I can't prevent myself from doing that. So I will try to police myself in that. In the fair side, there's a ton of slides in this deck. So there's going to be a couple I'll gloss over because they don't really necessarily affect the ultimate public policy question that you have to face. So I'll explain that as we go. Essentially, the story of the county jail has to be told against the backdrop of the overall position of the county in terms of population growth. We relied on Wichita State University's Center for Economic Development and Business Research to provide us Ellis County population into the future. And so over the next quarter century, the overall growth rate is pegged at 11.4%. Now, for our purposes, there's a couple things that I'd like to point out. That 11.4% is absolutely everybody in the county or who is forecasted, projected to be in the county in a quarter century. Not all of those individuals are necessarily not to be impertinent, but they're not the customer base for the jail necessarily. That is inclusive of children and senior citizens who don't come to the jail, at least in very large numbers. What we tend to base our projections on would be the adult male rate of growth. And so on the chart, you see a blue line and an orange line. The orange line is a little bit flatter. The adult male growth rate projected out by Wichita State is somewhat lower a number. Now, all that said, this is really just for context purposes. In terms of the predictive power of the jail population from the county population, it is an indicator of how things might unfold, but it's not really the best predictor. We kind of bury it into our models to drive things. So it's not the strongest predictor out there. There's a lot of times we will come to a jurisdiction, we will give exactly this type of presentation, and the Board of County Commissioners will always seize upon this number and talk about it. And I just want to be very clear, this isn't really the keys to the kingdom for understanding this story of the jail. If it was, our business would be significantly different, and predicting jail sizes would be a lot simpler and more straightforward. So adult males is what we use really as the context for potential growth into the future. Now we focus really on the jail population itself. And on the chart, you'll see a number of our charts will say ADP, that's average daily population. That's just an average of who was in the facility on any given day. We acquired a ton of raw data in the system that allowed us to forensically reconstruct the population. Essentially what we did is we plugged in everybody who was held in the facility, all the variables that went into the jail's inmate management system, and we're able to reconstruct what the population was. And luckily, before this current inmate management system was in place, the county sheriff did a great job of recording each day's population so that we could go back as far back as January 2017 to give us what the daily numbers were. When we reconstruct the jail numbers for any facility, those numbers are a little bit higher, like 1 or 2 people. In this case, might be about a half a person on a daily basis higher. The reason why is the daily snapshots that county jails typically take are run at, say, 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning. And so an individual who's booked at 6 in the morning and then bonds out 2 or 3 hours later will never show up on that count. Our reconstruction is every single person that comes in, and it's based on how long they stay. And so our numbers might tend to be a little higher than the given facility. Now to the graph itself. You'll see that the population was relatively stable. If we work from left to right, 2017 and 2018, it's running at, say, like 65 individuals per day. It goes up, but it's relatively stable until we hit the pandemic. And you see that the impact of the pandemic is fairly clear. And there's a rather quick rebound in 2020. One bit of kind of curious trivia, and it's interesting to me as a nerd. You might find it interesting as well, as the dips after the initial wave of the pandemic correspond nicely to other subsequent waves of the pandemic. You might remember, the various reconstitutions of the virus itself, and we see dips in this population that correspond to the various waves of COVID-19. We get into 2022 very early. There's a significant drop in the population, and then a very quick rebound where the population builds back such that in fall of last year, the population actually eclipsed 80. And if you were to have run the forecast back then, I think our results would have been relatively alarming, because the curve up until the fall of 2023 is pointed nearly skyward in terms of how many individuals are held, and then it dropped back. That's a pattern that we see with a lot of jails, that typically the population grows during warmer weather months into the fall, and then it decreases. It's a seasonal pattern, kind of dictated, or at least parallels warm weather and cold weather. And so that's the monthly population. And at the end of our data in April of 2024, the population is residing just at around 60, not altogether different today from what those numbers are. on a daily basis, our reconstruction gave us this. The curve of this, it matches that monthly view that we showed. This is basically our depiction of each day. If you were to really zoom in on this chart, this is actually not a line. This is a series of dots representing our reconstruction on a daily basis. And so you can see the ebbs and flows of the population, and there's some pattern to this, that on certain days of the week the population is higher than other days of the week, and that's something that we have to consider as we look at plans necessarily for housing individuals. The table in the lower right gives us a comparison on an annual basis starting from 2017 down to 2024. The column on the right gives you the comparison of year to date. So essentially, if you look at 2017, the population was only 0.7% higher than it is year to date in 2024, and so you can see those percentage numbers show a significant decrease, not surprisingly, during the pandemic. Yes, sir.
I want to stop you just for a second. This is showing the average daily population in the Ellis County Jail currently. Is it taking into account inmates that are not in the facility on that day?
Great question. Yeah, this is everybody for whom you are responsible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, a great question, because naturally if you put people out to us, you have to account for those bodies, because essentially you want to house them all in the county, and so we have to factor those in, and luckily we were able to get the raw data. So overall, the story is, since the first couple waves of the pandemic, the population has rebounded, and it's really only in the last couple months of the data that it dropped a little bit. Otherwise, there'd be some significant population questions for you as a jurisdiction. Now, what determines that curve that we saw on those two charts? Generally, every jail's population, and really any county's free world population, is determined by inputs and subtractions. For a jail, we talk about bookings. Those are admissions to the jail, and then how long they stay, the average length of stay. So you'll see some charts that say ALOS. Just in your mind, think about it. This is stay. This is the average of how long everybody who is released in a given month or a year actually stayed within custody. Essentially, the story of the jail's population boils down to these two factors. Bookings are, in a lot of ways, influenced long-term by the population growth that we talked about on my first substantive slide. It's a little unique for this county because you have I-70 running through the county. And so that's not necessarily, individuals who end up in custody of the jail traveling along I-70, a significant portion of those individuals are not citizens of the county. And so to just give you a growth rate for the free world population of males and say this is predictive of the future, it doesn't tell the whole story of bookings, because you are taking in really a percentage of individuals who originate from outside the jurisdiction. The average length of stay itself is predicted by criminal court case processing, which we'll look at in a subsequent slide. So here is the graph of the average daily bookings. You can see by the scale that it used to run at, say, 5, 6. Before the pandemic, it revolves around the number 4 per day. You can see the pandemic fairly clearly. The number lives for about 20 months at really below 2 individuals booked per day on average, and then the number rebounds during 2022 such that if you look 2 years ago this week, you're at nearly 4 or 3.5 on a daily basis. What has happened since 2022 is the number has stabilized around that 3 number, and that's where it lives today. And again, you see the comparison. So essentially, there's fewer individuals now that we're 4 years on from the first wave of the pandemic. You compare post-pandemic with pre-pandemic, you have really a 50 to 25% reduction of the individuals coming into custody, which has really helped keep your jail count low. Now, to really potentially confuse you, as I graph the average daily population against the bookings, you'll see there's a little bit of a trick here. The left side scale of the chart in black is the average daily population of the jail. The right side scale is your average daily bookings. You can see that they march in step with each other, relatively speaking. The curves very much match each other as we go. When you run statistical analysis of this, up until, say, 2023, the end of 2023, it's extremely predictive of the jail's population. Now, bookings have decreased so far this year slightly, but the average daily population has increased. So let's think about a couple slides ago, I say there are two factors that predict the jail's population, bookings and average length of stay. So right off the bat, looking at this chart, we know that the jail's population has increased slightly. It's not because more people are coming to jail, it's they're staying longer in jail, and so we'll unpack that in a few slides. When we look at the reasons why these individuals are coming to jail, this table gives you a average daily count of the individuals coming. The top offense for these individuals is a DUI misdemeanor. And before I go on, let me explain one thing. A lot of individuals come into custody with multiple charges. Somebody might have, say, 3 or 4 charges. What we did is we went through each individual's charges and used a ranking system. If I was a true nerd, I would say it's an algorithm and try to sound fancy. It's basically we rank everybody's charges in the Kansas statute table, and we look at the most serious charge. So, for example, if an individual is in on a littering or lower level public order offense, but then an aggravated assault, a violent offense, that aggravated assault is really what we care about more. And so this table reflects the most serious offense that is there. We sorted it by the 2024 charges, and the second most common, most serious offenses versus government on a misdemeanor level, is typically resisting arrest, fleeing, eluding, giving false ID to law enforcement, contempt of court, failing to appear for a court sentence. The more serious individuals, the more serious charges that fall into those groups, you can see down a little past halfway on the list, the offenses versus government felony. Offenses versus people are abuse situations that don't rise to the level where an individual is charged with an assault. However, some of the child abuse statutes, violating restraining orders, domestic violence fall into the offenses versus people level. The others, I think, are relatively straightforward. VOP stands for violation of probation. And you can see what our numbers look like. We get to very small numbers as we work our way through the bottom of the table. And you can see in red in our comparison column that the felony weapons number appears to be a lot higher, and essentially we're talking really handfuls of individuals being compared across year. One of the big takeaways here is the violent felony number I want to highlight because it becomes important for us. It's the 7th most common booked offense into the jail, and you can see that the numbers have decreased. You were at 0.2 bookings per day in 2023, and you're roughly half that, a 36% decrease in the year-to-date levels. So that's who's coming into jail. It will differ when I show you this again for actually who's in jail. ALOS is our average length of stay. This is our other factor that is predictive of a...
Question on
yes, sir.
Slide above. So the bottom number, 3.02, that's the average bookings
per day.
When you go to the slide above that, where it's showing.
Absolutely.
So that 2.83, 3.1, 3. Those are the average bookings per day
on an annual basis.
And then
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Glad you pointed that out.
What is the everything else? You got 41%. What does that represent?
Yeah, everything else has gone up. These buckets, I think, just kind of guesstimating, I've got like 15 categories there. There's about 30 buckets that we throw everything into, and so we're talking, very sporadic numbers. For instance, one thing that's not on here is sex offenses. You don't have that many sex offenders coming into custody. If I had like a really large screen, I would expand that out and show you every single category. And a lot of those categories will be 0 for an entire year, but, 0.1 for another year, just because we're talking relatively low sample sizes. So that's everything else. And in fact, another thing that we ought to address, the fourth row on here is unknown. That's individuals where we just don't know the charge that was originated, and that was just within the records. What we've noticed is when it appears, my guess, is that when the jail cut over to the new inmate management system, some of the charges weren't necessarily showing up in the jail, or at least my means of retrieving it from the jail record. And there's just this little fraction of records that I just don't know their offense, because it does not exist for me.
Okay, thank you.
Great question.
Do repeat offenders, I mean, somebody's arrested and then booked and then they're put out and then they tend to be repeat, does that factor in any way as far as number of daily bookings, average stay?
Yeah, they're included. Let's say you get booked 4 times in a given year. I'm counting all 4 as separate, distinct events. The charges might be the same each time. If we had more individual charge data going back, say, 6 or 7 years, we would do a recidivism analysis. Typically, we look at a 3-year recidivism rate, and since our data with the new system starts in 2022, really, we don't have enough time to really give you a reliable estimate of how many people are coming back. Alan and I will happily come back in a couple of years and update this if that's what, if that would be helpful. But typically, if we have, say, 6 years, 7 years worth of data, we'll look at recidivism numbers because it is an important consideration. Average length of stay. Since the pandemic, you can see an increase. If you look at the left side, this is the average time that individuals stay in custody. The way we calculate it is we looked at everybody released during a month and take the mean, the average of how long they stayed. This does not mean that if you were to go over to the jail now and look at everybody's record for everybody held and tally up how long they've been in, that number is not average length of stay, the way we treat it mathematically. That would be average length of custody, I guess. So, I don't want to conflate the two. This is a good measure that is really predictive of average daily populations across the country. Prior to the pandemic, the number lived in the 15 neighborhood, 12.8 in 2017. It grows slightly as we go through time. So before the pandemic, the average length of time individuals were staying in custody was growing. And then you see spikes with the pandemic. We see this in every single jurisdiction with whom we've worked after the pandemic. I am estimating 30 projects since 2021, and we've seen almost exactly this graph. Basically what happens is the courts and the criminal justice systems across the country, in the name of really safety and sanitation and disease mitigation, when the first waves of the pandemic hit, were releasing everybody that they could, and that included individuals who had some longer stays in custody. And so we see really a dynamic variation from month to month and quarter to quarter for about 2 years here. And it's really not that unique to Ellis County, and it's calmed down somewhat. But if you look at the right side, you can still see the dynamism in the numbers. The average length of stay varies on a month-to-month basis a lot more than it did before the pandemic. The big takeaway that I want to communicate here is average length of stay has gone up. When you average it out, the average length of stay for the full year of 2023 was a quarter higher, was a quarter lower than it is now. 2024 is showing an increase, and we'll dig into a couple of theories of why that is so. And so you see the numbers absent the pandemic
fact, post-pandemic, 19 days on average, a lot higher than it was pre-pandemic. And then we get to 2024 year-to-date, and we're talking nearly a week longer for the average length of stay. To be clear, that's not necessarily great for keeping the population low. And then back up to one of my slides where we talked about bookings, right? The bookings dropped, but the population's going up. And remember, I plotted the two trends against each other. This is where this comes home to roost, that the population's peaking up, not because more individuals coming into the system and having contact with law enforcement and being booked into the jail. It's more individuals are staying longer in custody than they were. If I plot average daily population against average length of stay, it looks like there's no relationship. See the red line peaks up. I gave you a trend line here that you see it goes up during the pandemic, but the population goes down, which is counterintuitive. It runs directly against what I've told you, that this is predictive of the jail's population. It's just really an artifact, if you will, of some strange times in terms of a lot of people being released from the jail, which has the weird impact, if you will, of growing average length of stay. Kind of ignore 2020 and 2021 in a lot of ways because it's so unique. Yes, sir.
Question for you. You've done assessments for probably a multitude of years prior to the pandemic. Would this graph, is this something you've ever seen in your prior assessments?
We never saw this before the pandemic. This really changed a lot of things for us in terms of how we evaluated the future growth of facilities. 2021 and into really, I'd say mid-year of 2023, we were having to do a lot of statistical work to try to figure out, had the pandemic not happened, what would people's jail counts be? And then we didn't think that was great because the world is so different post-pandemic than pre-pandemic, and certainly with criminal justice. A lot of jurisdictions run court on video and have various video appearances that didn't exist beforehand. Well, that has an impact on populations. So we never saw anything like this in terms of a fundamental change. Can you think of anything that ever happened? I had one county commissioner, a large city in the southeast, actually ask me during presentation, can you predict the next pandemic? And I was like, wish I had that power. But, if we get another pandemic, and obviously we hope we don't, I think we'll see a lot of the characteristics of this graph follow in the same route, though I do believe we've learned some things from COVID.
Patrick, I think one compounding factor along with the pandemic was the George Floyd incident. Yeah. And so you've got the introduction of technology into video court appearances, everything, but you've got a change of mindset and philosophy in a lot of agencies on how law enforcement is done, carried out ever since the George Floyd incident, and that has also had a big impact pretty much across the board in what we've seen.
And there was a double whammy effect with the events of summer 2020 that I think George Floyd plus the pandemic impacted law enforcement staffing in a lot of jurisdictions. Not so much for this jurisdiction, but in a lot of places we've seen bookings numbers drop post-pandemic rather significantly just because they're having recruitment problems and retention problems with law enforcement officers on the street. That's not happening here. So yeah, the pandemic's major changes for how we do our assessments.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And so really, you look at this and go, well, hey, there's no relationship between average length of stay and average daily population, except if you look at the last 6 months of the chart, you see the trend lines are pointing up. And to simplify it, I'll show you this, which takes the noise out of the chart and just gives us the trends between bookings, which is blue, the average length of stay, which is red, and average daily population, population, which is black, sitting at the top. And so the average daily population trend line starts at 70, goes down post-pandemic, and then comes back up to a trend showing about 75. The trend obviously is kind of a moving average that isn't really necessarily the exact number. You see bookings go down. The right side of that blue dotted line there, bookings are pointed down, the red line's pointed up. The population has come up really because of the average length of stay has increased. Bottom right, very last bullet, I think somewhat important, that if Ellis County went back to the booking levels on a pre-pandemic basis in 2019, with the current average length of stay, your jail's population would be over 100. So, just to make sure that we're clear on that, if the intake numbers were what they were pre-pandemic, using today's average length of stay, we know mathematically speaking your population would be 105, 110 instead of the current level, which is below 60. So average length of stay is very important. You might remember this table where we looked at on a per offense basis of the average daily bookings. This is the average length of stay for individuals by those charges. I kept the categories, the lines, sorted by the number of bookings, so this matches up line by line with the bookings table that I showed you. Bottom line here, you can see your total days, 19.12, average length of stay in 22, 23, 19.04, just shy of 26 the year to date. You can see a pattern here. I want to call your attention to about the, I think it's the 7th line, the violent felons. We're staying in 26 days, then it doubles to 53 days in 2023, and then it goes up to 144 days. That's essentially the keys to the kingdom for understanding the jail's population right there. These individuals have serious offenses. In a lot of ways, I am safe in saying that these individuals are a danger to the community. You want to keep them held. However, it's taking longer to get these individuals processed through the court system, and so that's what is really, in a lot of ways, driving the jail's population. You want to keep violent felons out of the public to maintain public safety. However, processing these individuals takes longer. If you look at a lot of the felony charge items, you can see that the processing times, the average length of stay times for these individuals have gone up during the year. Now, one of the things that I would be totally remiss in pointing out, my bottom right bullet speaks to this, is that I've been talking about mean numbers, not to take us back to like 8th grade statistics where we learned mean, median, and mode, but median is that midpoint. So to figure median average length of stay for August to 2024, we would take everybody who was released in 2024 and we would sort them by how long they stayed, from a few hours to a few months. And then the median is the midpoint of that list. We take the median sometimes when we're trying to avoid a disproportionate impact of the average numbers for people that have extremely long lengths of stay. When I look at the median length of stay, it's 0.82. Which means that 50% of individuals booked into the Ellis County Jail are released during the first day of custody, 0.8 of a day, which is what, like 18 hours in, 19 hours in, somewhere in there, maybe a little more. You get my drift. That is extremely efficient. Typically, we see this median number live at like 2 days. So the front door of the criminal justice system for this county is extremely efficient at processing individuals to release. The lower level offense individuals are released fairly quickly, and the jail ends up holding the violent felons, the offense versus people felons, the offense versus government felons. What this means operationally for the sheriff's office is the individuals who are held in the facility are much more serious than they were 5 years ago in terms of security risk. You hold a very serious population that the sheriff's office has to maintain safety and security for all involved. And really, post-pandemic, what we run into in a lot of jurisdictions is the facility population is a lot more serious or riskier than they were on a pre-pandemic basis. Another way of looking at average length of stay is by how they get released, how the individuals get released from custody. I give you the mean in white, mean average length of stay, and then the median, the midpoint. You can see the median is always lower because it's not as, it's more robust to the impact of longer staying individuals. And then the end size, if you will, the number of releases are on the far right of the table. Call your attention to a couple things. Individuals who bond out of custody, the average, the means are fairly low, but you see they're all over the map. We look at the median to tell us how people are released from custody. You can see for 2024, individuals who post bond to get out, they're staying 0.2 of a day, which is what, 2.4 hours. So a lot of your individuals, and certainly the individuals who are posting bond to get out, 50% of them are released during the 3rd hour of custody. That is really fast, and that's great. I think that speaks well of the individuals who are processing people through, and it speaks well. You can see that a lot of the numbers live in, numbers that are less than a week. We skip down to release to KDOC. These are individuals who are sent to state prison. Was it 98 days on a median basis, then 126, and now it's 167. Not great, and certainly a lot of, in fact, just about arguably the vast majority of these release reasons aren't in control of the sheriff's office. This is really court case processing, telling individuals how it's really the criminal justice system processing individuals through and releasing them. So at the front door, the stuff you can control, you're getting people out of custody. That's great. The back door, it's not the county necessarily controlling that. That is the judiciary and the courts. Couple slides here that I'll just zip through that talk about the composition of the population. Typically, females run at like 13, 14, 15%. There's really nothing remarkable here in terms of forecasts, so I'll just move on. The offense level of individuals who are booked is somewhat a little more interesting. You can see that individuals coming in, 70% on these are individuals in the population are about 70%. Typically, we see that 70 to 80% in a given facility. The other category, I think, is relatively unique to Ellis County. Other is a lot of your probation violators that they're only there because of probation violations. Also holds for other jurisdictions. A nearby county might ask Ellis to hold somebody because they can't be in their county jail. Those, a courtesy hold is what that's called. Individuals being transported through might overnight at the facility. Question?
Yeah, I've got a question on kind of overall arching here. With your numbers, how many of these numbers are affected by the Department of Corrections, like the federal penitentiaries and stuff like that? How are those numbers trending to where we can't move people out? Or is there any information involved in that?
If it's a federal thing, they're here pretty quick.
Okay.
They pick them up and move them to their facility. We're not a federal, we don't hold for federal prisoners. So they're quickly moved to a federal location at that point in time, once adopted through that process. So the ones that we're going to talk about are the state charges.
Okay.
KDOC.
Okay, and with the state charges, are those brought into, those numbers brought into this, and how's the state doing, I guess?
It varies based upon the processing of the courts to get the paperwork done, and how quickly KDOC responds back to us saying we want them delivered to us on X amount of days. So that varies. Sometimes it's within 4 or 5 days. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 weeks. So it does vary a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
And if we jump back 3 or 4 slides and look back at this table down in the middle, the release to KDOC, I think reflects some of what the sheriff just said. You might have an individual who's fully sentenced and is awaiting pickup or transport to KDOC, and for whatever reason, they might sit for a given period of time. Where I'm from in the state of Tennessee, there's been times where there's no bed available at the state level, and so they languish in the county jail while they await.
And that was the information I was looking for.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Of course. Same table. We looked at bookings and average length of stay. Here's the actual population. I've resorted it by the amount of the proportion of the population. You might recall on the bookings and average length of stay versions of this, violent felony was the 7th row on the table, and DUI misdemeanors were at the top. Now look at this. DUI misdemeanor is just above our everything else category. It's a very small portion of the facility population. However, remember, they were our most frequently booked individuals. They just don't stay that long. So in terms of the overall population, they don't exercise that much weight in terms of the population. If you wanted to today reduce the jail's population, don't necessarily focus on the DUI misdemeanors. I mean, you could. It's really, you want the heavier hitters, which are your violent felons, drug felons, and to do that, you have to look at criminal court case processing to try to achieve a lower length of stay. So you can see that breakdown. The felony numbers rise to the top on this table, whereas on the bookings and average length of stay numbers, they were more towards the middle or towards the bottom. These individuals have more serious matters. It takes longer to get them through to case disposition, so they comprise a larger portion of the average daily population of the jail. So, by way of reference so far, we've talked about bookings and average length of stay, and we've talked about how average length of stay has gone up, and I've made some sideways references at the courts. We were able to acquire court case processing data from the state, and we were able to, in a lot of cases, match it with the jail records, and so we've got some court data. This first table isn't that great for our purposes. However, at the far right, you can see the filings, the cases that commence in court versus the cases that are disposed. Filings vastly outpace dispositions for the last few months. A lot of that is due to a cybersecurity incident that the courts had in the state of Kansas. You're still intaking cases, but not necessarily disposing them. You can see the disposition graph, the orange graph, goes very, very low in the fall of 2023. It's miraculous in a lot of ways that the state courts were able to maintain their business processes during that, because a lot of things ground to a halt. That has an impact on average length of stay for the jail, because if the court's not processing people, they're staying in the sheriff's jail, and that grows the population. Now, for our purposes, the time between the filing and the disposition of the cases is something that we look at. We looked at district court felonies. Again, the vast majority of your individuals held in the population, over 70% and probably about 80%, are in on a felony most serious charge. And so when we look at the time necessary to dispose of a felony case in Ellis County, pre-pandemic, it lived at, say, 100 days. During the throes of the first waves of the pandemic, it was nearly twice that, and it hasn't really recovered. There was some signs of recovery in 2022 and into 2023. You see that big spike on the far right? That's your cybersecurity incident. You don't have the ability to dispose of as many cases as you did before. That incident has gone, and we can see the processing dropped back at the end of our data back in to 150 days, the far right point on here. The takeaway is the post-pandemic case processing is higher than the pre-pandemic case processing, which has had the effect in the last few months of growing average length of stay. I plot average length of stay, the red line, against our felony case processing time. I'll make it easier for you on this graph. I removed the noise. Let's look just at the trend lines.
That's the keys to the kingdom for understanding the Ellis County jail population right there, is essentially case processing time drives the average length of stay of the jail, which drives the population of the jail. The bottom line here is you're taking fewer people into the system. However, the ones that you are taking tend to have more serious matters. They stay longer in custody. You're processing out very efficiently the more minor charges as a system, and I'm highly complimentary of the Ellis County criminal justice system for doing that. On the back end of things, individuals are taking longer to get their cases processed through, and that's putting some degree of pressure on the jail's population. So that's who's in the jail, why they're in the jail, and some of the historical trends and the predictive nature of the facility. I'm hired to do jail population forecasts, and so we have that. It's sort of ironic. We couldn't be here last month due to a hurricane, and I show you a hurricane map to give you really some disclaimers about jail population forecasting. This hurricane map that's here is a hurricane that came ashore in 2004 when I lived in Central Florida. In fact, that yellow hurricane dot in the middle of the state of Florida is my house in 2004. We had 3 hurricanes hit that year. We did not have a hurricane in Orlando, Florida for 40 years. And one day in August, we had our first one, and we boarded up our houses, and then we had the second one, and this was the third one, like 4 weeks later. And I literally had neighbors, based on this forecast, where you see the forecast track takes the hurricane up into the Atlantic and away from shore. I had neighbors that were pulling the boards off their windows. I was too lazy or was on the golf course or whatever and left my boards up on the house, and the hurricane does a U-turn. And everybody is mad at the weather forecasters. And it's basically, it boils down to this, and it's a good lesson for forecasts of all kinds. The weather forecasters didn't know what they didn't know when they built the forecast tracks. And the forecast tracks taking Hurricane Jeanne up into the North Atlantic, they could not see possibly the existence of a low pressure trough that worked its way into Florida, seemingly out of nowhere. The computer models back in 2004 weren't as good as they are now. In fact, if you were to run that forecast now, that hurricane, they would be able to map it coming ashore. The same thing happens for criminal justice forecasting. It's the forecasts that I'm about to show you are only as good as what I know on the day the forecasts were made. If the Kansas legislature in 2025 changes bail rules or changes processing of certain individuals, that impacts my forecast. I don't know in 5 years what the legislature will possibly do. We could theoretically have another pandemic that turns this on its ear. And so a lot of the assumptions here, certainly for my first forecast, the status quo forecast, is based on everything being in place when I made the forecasts remaining in place, which we know is unrealistic. And I don't mean to undercut my credibility in front of you right away, but I do want to point out that I don't have a crystal ball. I am pretty good at giving you mathematical models of what I think will happen in the future, but I can't speak to what public policy is going to look like down the road. So here is the status quo population forecast. Again, this assumes that nothing changes anywhere in Ellis County from where it was in April of 2024. If key personnel and policies within the criminal justice community were to change, that would impact the guidance of this forecast. Essentially, when we break down our models, we ran probably, I think it was over 1,000 simulations of the future, and we picked what performed the best in terms of diagnostic statistics, and that's what this forecast is. Essentially, the story of this forecast is that average length of stay is going to continue to grow. There's good reasons for that. There's a shortage of attorneys, both at the defense level and the state level, for processing cases, and so cases naturally are taking longer to work their way through the system. That's something that is statewide in the state of Kansas, arguably nationwide. And so that's going to put pressure on the courts, and we think case processing time, unless somebody can get a whole ton of attorneys in, processing time is going to continue to incrementally grow into the future. We think bookings will remain stable across time. You're essentially fully staffed at local law enforcement level. And at that point, there's maybe a function of the overall population growth from my very first slide, putting some pressure on bookings long term. But again, your adult male population is going to go up by what, 8 or 9% in a quarter century. And so there's really not much immediate impact. But essentially, the population is slated to grow based on our mathematical model. You can see the variables are listed for you. We ran a ton of different projections. The bottom line is a quarter century from now, the average daily population is 102. That's an average. There's going to be days where the population is at 80. There's going to be days where the population is possibly at 122. To actually think about beds requires us to do some additional math. So we translate population into beds by adding two factors. Essentially, to get the bridge between average daily population and the bed need of a facility, we have two considerations to make. First of all, there is that daily variation of the population. Certain days are busier than others. When I first cut my teeth in criminal justice in Central Florida, Wednesdays were terrible for us because the courts remanded people back to jail on Wednesday afternoons. More people would be booked in on Friday, and so Friday night wasn't great for us, but Wednesdays were terrible for us because we got a lot of people that came to us from the courts. In this case, we see seasonal fluctuation, more people in warm weather months versus cold weather months, and there's a daily fluctuation and other things. The sheriff's office staff have to be able to accommodate those peaks, those rises and falls in the population. So you can't just look at the average number. You have to accommodate what your worst days are. And so we have a means of calculating that. We don't look at the absolutely worst day that the population in Ellis County had. We basically look at your 10% most crowded days, take an average of it, look at those days as best we can, and calculate a peaking factor. It's going to be higher for females because you have fewer females in custody, and so when you add one to the list of females, it's going to have a greater proportional weight, such that the peaking factors for females are 18%, for males it's 12.5%. That's one of the numbers we have to add to the average daily population so that we get to beds. The second factor is what we call a classification factor, or really an operational factor. There's a couple realities to running a jail. You might have 10 empty beds in one side of the facility, but you might not be able to have those beds be occupied because they're not in the right spot. You don't want to house males and females together. You don't want to house your DUI misdemeanors and your violent felons together necessarily. You want to maintain safety and security for individuals. You want to keep known enemies apart from each other, co-defendants apart from each other as best as you can. You might have to close down a unit to perform basic maintenance, and so you need some operational internal capacity to shift the population around to be able to maintain safety and security. There's kind of a standard rule of thumb that we use in the absence of clear classification data of 15%. So essentially the story is this: we have that average, but then we have to add that peaking factor, which is bullet 1 on this slide, and we add the classification factor, which is bullet 2. And so this table, which is potentially confusing, that I'll step you through. Females are on the left side. The average daily population of females in 2049, we project to be 14 individuals. The peaking factor equates to 3 extra beds needed to accommodate the rise and fall of the female population on an hourly or daily basis. Then we have that classification operational factor, right? That you need some internal capacity to move individuals around. That equates to 2 extra beds there. So we start from 14 average daily population of females on the bottom row of the table, going to 19 for a bed need. We do the same math for the males, which is the unshaded section of the table. Average daily population of 88 equates to 112 beds. When we add it up on the far right, your average daily population of 102 to safely and securely operate the facility is 131 beds necessary to house those individuals. Questions about this? Because this is a critical point.
So, to make sure, we need the 102 on the males, is that, or 131 on the males, or 131 in the facility total?
131 on the facility total. If you look at bed need for the male section, 112 beds for males to house an average daily population of 88.
Okay.
So that's our status quo forecast. Nothing changes. We
Need an extra 19, that's what I guess Nathan may be asking, is we have 131 needed for males and 19 for females. Would that mean we need 150 total?
No, sir.
Or
If you add the
131?
112 bed need for males with the 19 bed need for females, it equates to
Okay.
131.
There we go, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So that right side in gray, those two columns, kind of your
Okay.
bottom line total number.
Okay.
We came up with two alternate forecast scenarios. We didn't want to just say, well, if nothing changes, here you go, and then we leave. Essentially, we know there's going to be changes in processes and other things, and so we wanted to be able to give an effort that has a longer shelf life than just saying, here's the status quo. We provided two alternate forecasts. One scenario that we think is certainly possible is that average length of stay continues to grow, but then for whatever reason your bookings return to where they were on a pre-pandemic basis. So if arrests and detainments return to where they were, we can see more individuals coming up. I think there's a degree of realism. When we were on site in late February here, we talked to the vast majority of stakeholders in the system, and there are some agencies that are aware of the jail situation in terms of bed count, and for instance, probation violators and others, there's some degree of these agencies pulling back and holding off on returning individuals to jail, and because they're aware of the situation that the sheriff's office finds themselves in. And so there is always the chance that if you build the jail out to the numbers that we're saying in the status quo forecast, individuals will perceive the capacity being available, and they will start re-detaining people that they weren't before. In other words, right now, community corrections, I believe, holds off on weekends, weekend returns to jail. If bed capacity is available and the staff are there to supervise them, I don't see any reason stopping community corrections from returning individuals to custody. I think the time-worn phrase is, if you build it, they will come. There's a degree of that, and when we talk to the stakeholders, there is awareness of the current situation of jail's capacity. And so I do see a realistic scenario where our status quo might miss a little bit to the low side. You'll have more people return to custody. Yes, sir.
Some of those statements that you made, that we have partners that are maybe holding off on our jail population, and I guess this is a question for the sheriff, could we potentially be creating problems down the road by not booking people that would otherwise be booked?
Yes.
I mean, I hate to put you on the spot.
Well, the reality is, depending on the crime that's committed, it could go out and commit more crimes, which in turn creates more victims. So yes, if they should be in jail, yeah, I mean, yes. So the number that's projected here may need to actually be a little higher than we have to make sure we jail, I guess would be my answer.
Okay.
Another thing that Alan reminds me of is if you change the philosophy of the county attorney's office, right now the number of individuals detained is at a lower level. A change in philosophy of that office might result in more individuals being held.
Okay.
So there are scenarios for this booking count to go up. At the current average length of stay, that grows the population to an average of 135 on a daily basis. Now, all is not lost. Let's say you do have that change in philosophy, you do have capacity built in, and then everybody starts showing up. I don't think that's the end of the road. There's some things that the courts can do on their side to speed up processing. That in our written report, we've got some recommendations in there that we were able to meet at least one judge, I think two, where we discussed some things that could be different about the Ellis County criminal justice process that might result in lower processing time and lower average lengths of stay. If I could wave a magic wand today, I would give the sheriff the power to request bond hearings at the 10th day of incarceration that I think would go a long way towards reducing case processing time, or at least certainly the average length of stay for the jail. So this scenario, really in some ways, I could say is like a worst case scenario, is that they start coming back, but you're not processing them any more quickly. What that translates to, the same math here, when we employ it, the bottom line is 174 beds for your average daily population of 135. A best case scenario from our modeling is you get the average length of stay back to 18 days where it was pre-pandemic, and you factor in an increase in bookings. Suddenly that average length of stay is really important now. If you can chop a week off of average length of stay, get a 9% increase in bookings long-term due to the higher population of the county as a whole, your average daily population is not altogether different from where it is today. To achieve this, I think, would be a significant task, because at that point you're having to involve the judiciary and the courts in making some fundamental changes. And the bottom line to that is that those folks will be cooperative, but they can only go so far. You have a shortage of attorneys in the state, and that's really the fly in the ointment in terms of criminal justice case processing, and certainly in the western half of the state of Kansas. So that's your alternate. You can see the 70 detainees translate into 90 beds. So it's a much better result, but again, the asterisk there is that's an absolute best case, and that means that we go and we scare up some attorneys and move them to Ellis County. To summarize our forecast, you see the three scenarios. Status quo, we think, and it falls almost smack in the middle of our two scenarios between the average length of stay growth and the return to 2019. So that's where we are with the statistical analysis. I think we'll turn it to Alan for the planning. Does anybody have more questions for me and what I presented? I realize I threw a ton of charts and tables and numbers, and I talked very quickly, but hopefully I've promoted some understanding of the story of the jail.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So we've got our three forecasts, our status quo and our kind of best case and worst case there. And so we were asked to take a look at, how would you go about planning for each of these options? And really for the status quo, with a bed space need, looking out to the future of 131 beds, the total number of available beds that you have today is 72. But if you look at your operational capacity, again, like Patrick was talking, your peak days, your classification factors with folks that you can't really house together, your operational capacity is really only about 62 of what you have today. That's going to leave you short nearly 60 beds for your future population projection. 59 beds, adding 59 beds to the existing facility, that will get you the total number of beds that you're going to need, but it's not going to do anything to address the deficiencies that you have in the current facility now. There's issues with line of sight. There's issues with plumbing and infrastructure. that you have there. There's a lack of program space, of recreation space, of adequate space for medical, for mental health, counseling. In spaces there. So yeah, you can add on to what you have, and those beds can be configured and designed to meet the needs for those, but it's really not going to address the current spaces that you have to work on. So we looked at what some ballpark costs and figures with that. And first of all, let me throw out a huge disclaimer. We are not architects. We are not engineers. I come from a jail operations background. I don't like it when an architect will say, here's a design for a jail, and let me tell you how many staff it's going to take to run it. Because architects have not run jails before. I've run jails before, but I've not designed them. So I don't like it when they try and step on my toes for staffing, and I'm not going to try and step into their arena there. With that said, I am working with an architect now, a facility down for a similar study down in Finney County now, and he does a good bit of jail work in Kansas. He thought a good current ballpark cost per square foot, safe number right now, would be in the ballpark of $800 a square foot, or for construction costs for this type of facility. And so this is for ballpark planning only. But if we look at some current deficiencies in the facility of expanding the vehicular sally port, which is very, very tight right now, adding 59 beds of housing, adding new program space. We've talked about the kitchen there and how tight the space is. That could total in the ballpark of just over 20,000 square feet of additional space and renovation space in the facility. At $800 a square foot, we're looking at almost $16.5 million. Once you add on soft costs of there, which is ballpark of 15%, you're pushing $19 million estimated cost. This is to add on to, not to replace, but to add on to your existing facility now. That we could be looking at as much as close to $19 million, but keeping what you currently have now. It's not replacing that, it's not upgrading that, it's just adding on to that. Questions on that process and methodology as to how we came up with that?
Yes, I just have a question for Scott. What percentage is mental health? Because we have a mental health facility. How long are they in there? Could this help us out to get them individuals out and get them treated?
The percentages, I'm going to say we're probably seriously mentally ill people that we have reoccurring 5 to 7%, like we're taking the Larnard and they're coming back. But there is a lot greater number than that have mental, but we're able to function. Our nurse is able to prescribe, or the pipelines is to keep stable. The important part is there's just not enough room for counselors to come in.
Scott,
Yes.
would you mind stepping up to discuss some of this so the public can hear it?
Did you point at me, Bobby?
No, she pointed at me.
The important part is we just don't have a place where they can have those meetings and they can meet with counselors in a safe location. It's just really confined, and we're using it to the best of our ability. Mental health is a big thing, obviously. And if we can control their behaviors through medications, and we're teaming with High Plains Mental Health, as you guys know. AOT goes up there and they meet with people and they develop a plan to follow them once they leave our facility. We're new into the program. I don't know how well that's working. I think it's working pretty well, but we have reoccurring people coming back in. That's going to occur. But the AOT program is supposed to follow them and make a plan and keep them on track so that they don't come back. Did I answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. It's going to be one of them variation things where
Yeah.
in and, stay or not stay.
Yeah, and the reality of it is they shouldn't be in that, and they touched on it a couple of different times. Classification is key for us. Right now, we have a mishmash of people with one another, and classification lessens our liability, and we're unable to do that because we just are to capacity most of the time, but we do the best we can, so, all right?
All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So taking a look at the first scenario, and that's a increase and a growth in the average length of stay. This scenario looks at a need for 174 beds over the next 25 years. That's more than 100 more than what you have today. And really looking at the same model on this, we would be adding on to what you currently have right now. So you'd be keeping your existing space now, but would expand areas such as kitchen, healthcare programs, because with this level of and degree of expansion, it's going to be a lot more than just the inmate spaces. That's going to need more administrative space too. That's going to be not just maybe a little addition to the kitchen. It might be a little more significant addition to the kitchen and some of those core areas in facilities there. All the existing cells are built for double occupancy, meaning two offenders in each cell. Currently, with the limitations that you have now, if you have one of those individuals act out and you need to isolate them and house them by themselves, then you've just lost another bed because you can't have that individual in with someone else there now. And so for these additional beds for this new facility, we're looking at factoring in some single occupancy cells to be able to deal with those types of individuals. Square footage costs or square footage numbers are going to go up a little bit if you're talking about a cell for a single individual, for multiples of those, as opposed to having two inmates in there at a time. All of that comes into play. Again, with an expanded vehicular sally port, with more program space there, we kind of ran the numbers the same as we did with the previous. With the status quo projection. So for the total square feet addition, we're looking at almost 36,000 square feet. Again, applying that same $800 per square feet. With the soft costs, you're looking at probably in the ballpark of close to $33 million. And again, that's to add on to what you currently have now, as opposed to replacing that with a whole new facility.
I
For
guess
scenario number two.
From a practical standpoint,
What's that?
from a practical standpoint of the facility to add on, do we have 20 to 30,000 square feet available to even add on? And that's what I don't,
I would say very unlikely, because then you're going to start, with that location within town, you have minimal parking, access to the courthouse, to the sheriff's office. The only way you'll be adding on, if you double the size, you'll be almost completely eliminating an entire parking lot in that area.
And you'd be looking at going up.
Or up, which,
That's going to reduce your footprint there, but yeah, you're probably looking at a couple of different stories.
okay.
We're going to, which may or may not fit into the aesthetics of the area as well.
yeah, and we looked at the different options for the roof, in the way the types of roof were designed that would be aesthetically pleasing to the historical nature of the facility. Just to add a mansard style roof required columns to be all the way from the roof all the way down through the basement and new foundations, and that was millions and millions of dollars just for a roof. So I wouldn't know what that would entail with one story, let alone multiple. That would be outside my, and probably the sheriff's, engineers and mechanical engineers would have to figure that out.
I would agree. For scenario number 2, returning back to 2019 levels, in this scenario, there's a need for 18 additional beds above and beyond what you have today. Kind of the same thing applies, though. That would be in addition to what you have, but you would be keeping what you currently have now. Applying the same math and logic to that in addressing needs that you have. Again, the vehicular sally port, we're adding 18 additional beds and some program space. Probably the kitchen needs to be, it needs some help there now. So total square feet, much less, 8,800, $800 a square foot. Construction costs and soft costs all in, we're still looking at a ballpark of around $8 million for that. Again, that will get you the bed count that you need, but it's not going to address the shortcomings and deficiencies of what you currently have right now. So let's look at some pros and cons for some short-term expansion options. And we were asked to take a look and said, what could we do with the space that we have right now to kind of make it last a little longer, extend the shelf life of what you have. Some potential options, moving the kitchen and laundry down to the first floor from where it's at now. That would free up space for approximately 4 to 6 inmates in housing. An advantage of that they would be all on the same housing level as the existing cells and housing right now. The cons to that, moving kitchens and laundries are expensive. It's not just the equipment, it's the electrical. I don't know if you use gas in there at all now. It's the plumbing, it's the drainage for that. Is probably going to be a pretty high dollar move that I don't know if you're going to get the bang for the buck in being able to only free up 4 to 6 beds. It's going to be time consuming. You're going to have to come up with some alternative methods of feeding and laundering. In the meantime, I don't know, so far as building codes, how that would, this type of relocation would impact that. And back to the cost and the bang for the buck there, to be able to increase by about 4 to 6 capacity by about 4 to 6 is really not going to get you to where you need to be, even for your best case scenario with the additional bed space needs. If we move some storage that's currently in the exercise area to somewhere else, or maybe an outside building, that could be an additional 3 to 4 beds that could be gained. It would be next to an existing housing unit. They could use the same shower and day room space as that existing housing unit, and probably the disruption to the normal operations would probably be pretty minimal. The cons, you need to find a place to put the stuff that you have in there right now. And whether that's another part of the building, or whether that's another building, another area. Those supplies, from what I understand, are stuff that's used, if not daily, pretty frequently. So now you're going to be moving that in and out of the building, in and out of the secure perimeter from wherever you're going to put it. And it would eliminate potential space for inmate exercise and recreation that is very limited and in short supply as it is right now. Continue housing some inmates out of county. That's something that you're currently doing, that you've been doing as needed, and it's probably going to be the least expensive cost when it comes to relocating services, especially a kitchen or a laundry, or doing some demo and renovations to space that you have. The cons, access to family, friends, to the courts, puts a burden on the offender's family. It puts a burden on law enforcement, having to haul back and forth, and potential delays in getting folks to court. Your transport costs obviously are up, are raised. And going into the future, don't have any guarantees that I'm aware of the availability for beds in other counties and jurisdictions now. So it's worked in the past. It may work today. We don't know exactly how long those beds are going to be available, into the future. So really moving to some conclusions from all of this. You've done a pretty good job so far at maintaining what you have now with the inmate population, with the current levels, and that's just from different agencies and departments talking and working together right now, but that burden is continuing to grow and increase. The county is growing, not rapidly, but it is still growing, and bookings are going to increase, by some degree in percentage over time. I think Patrick did a great job of pointing out case processing times and how they impact your jail population. You just can't get away from that. And the shortage of attorneys on both sides of the bench there is not just an Ellis County problem. That's all across the state of Kansas that we're seeing in our other projects right now. Again, you've done a great job in managing the population that you have and the average length of stay that you have right now, but it's just getting tighter. Felony case processing, it can be approved through a number of different methods in strategies, but it's not going to get any easier than it is now. And with these options of building on, adding on, rearranging some of the space that you have right now, particularly with moving a kitchen and laundry or something like that, our opinion, I really think you're going to be better off probably using those dollars to house out for the time being until a plan is reached as to what we're going to do for additional beds in the future, because I don't think you can get away from the need. You're going to need to increase your capacity somehow. And really getting back to these three options, if I can get the fat fingers working right here. I think Patrick's done a great job in laying out statistically what we're looking at right here. I really don't think scenario 2 is too realistic, is too attainable. I think you're probably somewhere between the status quo and the scenario 1 there, because status quo, again, means nothing changes tomorrow from the way you do business today. And just with population growth and additional capacity, if you build it, more are going to come. I would think that you're somewhere between the status quo and the scenario 1, if not full on scenario 1 option there. But ultimately, that's going to be a policy decision by this board and the stakeholders here. And just as the jail is not a standalone island in the criminal justice system, it's just one piece of a big puzzle that's impacted by all these others. We would highly recommend this being a group discussion as to what makes the most sense and what's the most attainable for Ellis County, because you don't want to invest millions, if not tens of millions of dollars on a facility for it to be full when you open on day one. And you certainly don't want to overbuild with a lot of excess capacity there now. But we would be more than happy if the desire is there to work with you into the future as to how to go about tackling this. But with that, I would just kind of open it up to any kind of questions that you've had about this or anything that we've talked about this morning.
This is kind of going to be more of a question for Patrick, I think, but the analysis and statistics that were provided, that's just based on Ellis County and current projections of Ellis County. That's not bringing in the surrounding facilities that we currently house in that they may no longer be there or be sufficient.
Correct.
So that's not taking into account any of those.
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Gentlemen?
I have nothing.
I think you pretty well covered it. It's a lot to digest for sure. I do want to make a public note. It's in the agenda so the public can kind of read this. I think it's very well done. We'll make a note there as kind of on tacking on what you said there. The interviews I was reading through here of who you interviewed. I mean, this encompassed Chief Scheibler and this Hayes Police. It encompassed an interview with High Plains Mental Health. It encompassed the court system with Judge Dries, our county attorney, and of course the sheriff's office. So from that standpoint, I appreciate the work that was put in bringing in those people that have a stake in this and then giving us some guidance that we need to continue to work with those that have a stake in it. And again, the public can kind of read through that if they want, as far as the methodology, who was interviewed, and then the comments along with that came out of those interviews. So I appreciate that part being in the study.
Thank you for saying that. And I would like to say that Mr. Myers and Sheriff Braun bent over backwards for us while we were on site in getting those interviews scheduled and pulled together, as well as pulling together the data for this. They did a fantastic job. There's no way that we could have done what we did without their help. So they were really good. I think that, I don't know if any of the stakeholders that we interviewed that we got the sense that they were holding back. Everyone seemed to be on board, on the same sheet, seemed to be open, and really wanting to do what they can to help make things better. So that was very commendable, not just for these two, but for everybody involved in this process.
Sheriff, is there anything you'd like to add with the conversation here with what these gentlemen have presented? It's very encompassing, and I appreciate both of you.
No, really all I have to say is they did a fantastic job. They were great to work with. They communicated very well with us, and anything that they asked for, we tried to get to them. I have nothing negative to say about them. They did an outstanding job for us, and I think they're right on with their numbers, personally, from what I can see. So,
Okay. Thank you, sir.
As far as the stakeholders, were they more, and if you can answer it, you can answer. If not, I understand.
Sure.
Were they more for a new jail, or were they for remodeling, addition?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't recall a heavy bent one way or another. I think the recognition was there as to the limitations of the current facility. It's just like with High Plains Mental Health. They're here, they're working with, they just don't have a space to meet with them. Arresting and transporting officers with the existing vehicular sally port, you're really tight with what you have. I mean, there's no program space, there's no real activity space for the offenders here. And we mention the offenders a lot, and that's why we have a jail. But you have to remember his staff. Mm-hmm. They spend more time in this facility than inmates and offenders ever will. And you've got to have a good and a safe working environment for them. And I think that's kind of borderline for what they have to work with right now.
Thank you for putting it in those words. It's a very good way to look at it. We look at it and approach it from the inmate standpoint, but it's really the staff that are there.
Absolutely. I used to be one, so.
Are there a number of different regulations and that are involved in housing inmates in jails? I mean, is there state statutes that, I'm sure there's a number of statutes that come into effect. Do we have to have such things as rec rooms and stuff like that? Is there an inmate's bill of rights, more or less?
There are minimum jail standards.
Okay.
Kansas has minimum jail standards. There are national standards. State jail standards have more teeth. National standards are not required.
But when lawsuits come, and they do come, the courts give them an awful lot of consideration that's there. Former corrections officer, former jail administrator, I am very much for the staff and a good professional place to work. And I do think that working in a jail should be looked at as a profession instead of a job, and oftentimes it's not. But if you take an offender, and the analogy that I use quite often, if you lock them in a box with no access to recreation or productive activities for 30 days, 30 months, or 30 years, what do you expect them to be like when you let them out? And one day you're going to let them out. You're going to release them. And so what's the right thing to do? By having some out-of-cell time, by having some recreation time. If they're just locked in a cell all day long, then they're going to find things to do. And that's typically going to be to make life hell for his staff.
Okay. Thank you.
To be blunt. Yeah.
Okay.
Do any of ours, people go to like the minimum in Stockton, or is that pretty much a county thing, Scott?
To be honest with you, once they go to KDOC, we're not sure where they're
Okay.
sent to. Depending on the crime, I know there's been some in Norton and then there's been some in Stockton, but we kind of lose track after that. We can look it up, we just probably don't, more than likely, so.
Okay,
But
thank you.
that is a state-run facility. That is not a county facility.
Yeah, they're both state-run. They're corrections facilities, not
Okay.
detention facilities, so.
Okay. Any further questions for these two gentlemen?
I do not, thank you.
No, you guys did an excellent job.
Thank
I
you.
know when the last time you didn't make it here because of hurricane, that I had several phone calls about we don't need a new jail. So you guys did a good explanation. Hopefully a good presentation that people will understand. It's
Sure.
a high dollar item.
Yes, it is. I wish we could have given a lower cost, more rosy picture, but that's not what we're hired to do.
Absolutely.
Yep. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Again,
I
thank you
Very
appreciate
much for your
it.
time this morning. We appreciate it.
Yes. Okay. Next, we have the inmate housing fee increases. Sheriff?
Scott Brown, Ellis County Sheriff. Commissioners, before you, I sent in an agenda item. As you know, in our contracts that we're getting signed by Ellis as well as Victoria, we're working on, you elected to increase our daily rate in those contracts to 100, and what I'm asking is that we just make that consistent across the board. So if we do happen to house for someone from out of county, the dollar amount is the same, which is $100 per day. We found that to be what it's roughly costing us right now without we're not trying to make revenue, we're just trying to break even. And so I'd ask that you consider moving it from $65 to $100. And what will happen then is that it will officially have KDOC also pay that and the counties that we would house for if we did, which we don't.
Right. Okay.
So we currently, Ellis and the city of Hayes currently are at the 100?
We have got the contract signed from Ellis, which is listed in there. We are waiting on a response back from the city of Victoria. I presented that a couple of weeks ago. I'm waiting on that. The city of Hayes will not come until they move out or until you guys decide to change that and we submit a contract to them. So this is just for KDOC. And then say Rush County had some specific thing and we had some room, we would house them for them and we would charge them 100.
Okay.
And this is currently what we get charged when we house our inmates out of,
It varies depending upon those counties. Every commission has the right to set it at what they feel is fair.
okay.
And so how long has ours been at 65, so the community knows?
Actually, you were commissioner and you voted on it.
Okay.
What was it, 4 years ago?
4 years?
Yeah,
So-
4 years ago. We moved it to 65 from 40, and now we're asking to move it to 100, so they're consistent.
Is that something that we're going to do continuous now, or are we going to do yearly?
We'll assess it,
Okay.
I think, and we'll just run numbers. I mean, as you know, we just are in the process of looking at medical contract and those types of things. And as that increases our care as well as the food service contracts. And so we'll probably have to look and see where that break point is again for us in the future. It may be 2 years, it may be 3 years. I'm not sure. Okay?
Okay. I'll make the motion. I move to approve the increase of the housing of the inmates for municipalities and KDOC from $65 per day to $100 per day.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Commissioners.
Doc.
Next, we have our treasurer with an escrow account correction.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Reuter, Ellis County Treasurer. We had talked about this during the budget when we were meeting. The auditors this year, through their findings, had found that the escrow balance was off. And so they asked us to go through it month by month, and we actually went back to the last almost 10 years to find out where the offage was. Well, in CIC, which started in 2015, I wasn't sure what it was before that, it looks like the balance was maybe inputted wrong. Back then, it was $412,069.23. And after going back and balancing from 2017 to 2024, it has been balanced. But 2015 and 2016 were unbalanced, and it looks like we have two CIC. We have a CIC tax program and a CIC budget program. So when we pay somebody's escrow account, someone got their taxes paid back then, and it probably wasn't entered into budgetary also. So that's kind of where the offage looks like it was. And before 2015, I'm not sure how they processed their escrow program. But the total balance that was off was $39,002.89. And right now, we're balancing this every month. And like I said, we have been balanced the last 7 years, and that's about when my deputy, good job for her, has been who took it over.
Okay. Will this have any impact on our budget or financial status on our current budget?
No, we'll be able to make the transfer out of the general fund, Department 97, and there's budget authority to be able to do that.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions, or?
No. Now that you're keeping up on it, everything will stay
Yep.
like it's supposed to be.
I balance it myself every month.
Perfect, thank you.
That's why it's balanced.
Okay. I'll move to approve a transfer from the general fund 001 to the escrow fund 044 in the amount of $39,002.89.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
All right, thank you. Darren,
you.
you'll fill out the operational transfer for that?
I'll try to come up today and I'll get the exact
Okay.
numbers that you need for Fund 44, and we'll get it paperwork filled out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next topic is final draft of the 2025 Ellis County budgets.
Good morning, Commissioners. Darren Myers. The next item is the final touches to the budget for 2025. The commission is well aware of what we've done to get to the point of where we're at today. A lot of these items on this agenda are repeats of what was discussed last week, so I'll kind of skip over that. However, the only two changes that were made to the budget one was as a result of last week's discussion, but The other is from a meeting that we had with Public Works in regards to their staff and trying to increase communications. As the commission knows, their staff does not have county email addresses. And within the meeting, they thought that that would be a good potential idea to help increase the communications from a county-wide or department heads, et cetera, to have county email addresses. So in visiting with the IT department, we added just over $1,900 to their budget to compensate for kiosk licenses for them to have emails. And then with the set date of COLA for July of 2025, that reduced the amount of budget authority needed. And I think at the bottom of that page is the final number that would be left that puts us under what the number was last year for the total expenses of just over $80,000. And there was a discussion independently with the commissioner as well, maybe within the meeting is the possibility of the 2 new positions for Public Works for 2025, instead of having those budgeted to start in July of next year. If we had the ability, would be to move the hiring date up for those 2 new employees to January. And as you can see, that just barely gets us to that point of being able to move that hire date up if the commission would like to add that into the budget. Then that cost was $74,921. So keeping the total expenses would essentially be almost at that exact same, at the same level. The mill of just under 36 is the estimated mill rate still. So with that, with any other final changes or conversations today, the next step would be to have the August 20th meeting, the final approval of what the proposed draft is, so that way the county clerk can publish the documentation for hearing and notices of the actual budget. And then come September 10th, I believe, is the actual hearing and R&R hearing and everything for the 2025 budget, which will be the final step.
Okay. Comments? Personally, I like seeing, I do, if it's possible, I do like seeing adjusting those employees up,
Yes.
or at least opening those positions. With that being open does not mean they will be filled.
Right. If we can get it in there earlier, hopefully we can get some good people, or people, period, to apply. So
Will we be having, and not to rush it, are there any current scheduled retirements looming through that department?
Nothing official at this point. I know there are many that are eligible, but none that have officially put their notice in. I'll double check with. There's many that are eligible, but none that have actually submitted their official date. There's benefits to when they can actually do it, but I think there are some that are considering it, but nothing official yet. So there could be more openings throughout the next year.
Okay.
I guess to follow up on that, there is some that have talked to me, and they've got some dates, but they just, and no names mentioned, but yeah, it's coming.
There's concerns
Coming,
out there.
Yeah. The
Just
sooner we
knowing the demographics of that department.
Sooner we can replace them, better off we are.
100% agree with the demographics of the Public Works Department. We have I could probably do the statistics and look back, but I would say Public Works is probably has the highest amount of employees that would be eligible to be able to retire within the next year. And the transition that's going to come with hiring new employees, a different type of workforce, is definitely going to be impactful to their future.
With the tax notice that we've gotten with the assessed value for 2024, the property valuations have gone up, and that doesn't change anything at this point on the budget. We got that factored in as far as the value.
So the value that was notified back to the county clerk July 20th, I believe, is where all agencies have to report that estimated ad valorem tax collection number. That's one of the problems with the R&R process is that notification is sent to the clerk months in advance of where we actually know where the final budget is at. So all that is an estimate. However, I believe the number that was given to the clerk as the estimate back in July is higher than it is now. So if you wanted, I could try to do some quick budget numbers, and I can pull up some documents.
I got the math here. I mean, it does, on this hearing, it shows that our mill will be at 36.78 for me, 881.24, but again, we're lowering the mill to 36, so the amount of tax that it shows on here on the county currently will actually be less. It's still going to exceed revenue neutral, but it's not factored at where we are currently at the budget.
100%, and that's why I say it creates a little bit of confusion with the whole hearings, the processes, the notifications, because that's all an estimate. And as the commission knows, just at the July 18th meeting, there was over $800,000 in cuts. And then there's a different adjustments that happen in these final stages, just as we're discussing here. And that it gets makes an impact for what that R&R hearing is compared to what it actually is going to be come to next week when the commission approves that final notification and the final parts of the budget.
All right. Okay.
Well, like I said, I believe the number that was submitted to the clerk was several $100,000 additional property tax valuations than what the budget is where we're sitting at today would actually require, which is good for the taxpayers because it's even less than what the R&R hearing is.
And that goes to our conversation we've had before. We're not taxing to the maximum tax that this is showing. I mean, if we did, taxes would be a little bit higher if we taxed at the same max of the same mill levy that we did last year. So again, this is, once you crunch the numbers, it's going to be higher than what the actual number we will probably approve. Again, yes, the revenue neutral hearing is on September 10th at 8:30 here in our chambers.
Okay. I guess that would be somewhat of the direction. Michael, are you okay if we look at moving those two employees in Public Works forward a little?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. So you would have we could put that into it.
The only change that would be from today until Tuesday's meeting when you approve the final, you're not approving the budget, but approving the final draft to be put into the state forms, give the notifications to Bobby to be published, et cetera. The only changes would be the personnel changes. I'm not aware of any other changes from any department head or elected official. And then if we get any last minute changes to some new hires, I believe, I talked to HR yesterday, there's 3 or 4 potential new employees that are in various stages of their enrollment process or onboarding process, and that could change a little bit of the number, but those would only most likely be reducing the budget, not adding to it.
Okay.
So that would be the only thing that you should see by next week.
Okay. Very good. Okay. With that, we will have county administrator report.
I do not have anything this morning.
Okay. Commissioner reports. Michael?
Congratulations again to Lyle Pantel, who's recognized this morning on his completion of the National Emergency Management Basics Academy. We have a commission meeting, a joint meeting tonight. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
Where is that at in time? I should know, but
The meeting starts at 6 p.m. It'll be at the Ellis, or the Smoky Hill Country Club up on
so
Hall
tonight
Street.
a joint city, county, Hayes City and Ellis County Commission meeting at 6, starting at 6 at the Smoky Hill Country Club. And I also want to, last week I misspoke a little bit on an article I read about the sales tax, and it was reported on the city. That was actually reported by the Hayes Daily News and Becky Rogalski. Want to make sure I make that correction of where I read that and the information where it came from.
Okay.
Do I get?
Mr. Younger?
I did attend the City of Hayes meeting and the Shinchin meeting, and do we not have canvassing
Or Gil.
Monday, correct? Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
The 19th.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have.
Further correction, that was Gail Pike for the Hayes Daily News. I'm getting my names and places mixed up again, but that's Gail Pike.
Okay. Yes, we have our canvas on the 19th. And then I have been reached out to by people that may want to join the library board. For those who are listening that wish to volunteer for that board or any other board that is available, position available, you can go to the clerk's website and fill out a citizen's interest form or come in and talk to your county clerk. So she will have forms there available as well.
Yeah, I will add to that also, I did skip that. I did also have a individual that emailed me and was very interested, and that's good for our community that we do have volunteers that are going to do that for us. So nice.
Okay, with that, I believe we have an executive session.
Okay, I move the Board of County Commission recess to executive session for 20 minutes under the following exception to the Kansas Open Meetings Act pursuant to non-elected personnel matter exception. It's a personal matter. Those in attendance, the Board of County Commissioners are Mr. Bill Jeter, Mrs. Jennifer Taylor, and Mr. Darren Myers. And that's,
Recess at 11, or resume at 11?
yeah.
Second.
Okay.
Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
Resume at 11?
Okay, we resume at 11:39. With no further business, we will adjourn at 11:39.
See you all.
See you, Bill. Thank you.
Yeah. You got, any of you have any?
Okay.
Okay. Let me reach out to you.
Okay.